Hey everyone, Norm from Tested here at WonderFest in Louisville, Kentucky, and here with Matt from Matt's Models Customs. Great to meet you,
Nice to meet you, Norm. Thanks for having me.
Oh, pleasure to be here. This year, we see a lot of mecha represented.
A lot of mech.
Oh, this is so cool, because for model building, at least in America, people know Star Wars, Star Trek models, but you see a rise and maybe resurgence in people building gunpla.
Gundam in particular. I would say in the past 5 to 6 years, maybe since the pandemic, the Gundam community has really surged for a couple of reasons. People were home, kind of rediscovering their hobby of model building. Gunpla or Gundam is very easy to get into. It's very user or youth friendly, so the kids love it. They got little cute things and they got big things like this and snap together. You put it together, you can play with it. You don't have to paint it and it looks great. So it's a really great tool to get young people into the hobby.
Yeah, snap fit kit, you don't really need many tools at all.
Nope.
It's a pair of nippers and that's basically it.
Nail clippers.
That's it,
That's all
right?
you need. All you need is toenail clippers, you're good to go.
But there's a wide range of what you can do to take your kit to the next level. And as someone like you who's been building for over a decade, tell me about, first of all, the world of resin Gundam, because I didn't even know resin kits were a thing in the Gundam universe.
Right, so personally I built mostly resin kits. It just kind of interested me as far as the different subject matters that were available, not so quite commercialized. It's kind of like anything else. When someone else is producing something they enjoy or like, they kind of take creative license and freedom with that design. And then they produce, they sculpt it, the model, and they make a model kit.
And so this is an example of a resin kit.
Correct.
That maybe was someone's had purchased from a run of it, and you took it to make it look like a fully mechanized, to scale character.
Right. So this was a kit that was produced, I would say, 15 years ago. The company was called Neograde. They're no longer around. The sculptor's name was Pia. And I'm pretty sure this was a 3D rendered print kit. And the reason I say that is as I was working on the prep, you can see some layer lines.
Okay.
And you don't see that until you start sanding the primer.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty sure this was originally a 3D sculpt, just by when I was working on it. But this is a full resin kit, 350 parts. All resin with the exception of some little hinges that are inside these, like these can open and close, the chest can open and close. Those I think are, I'm not sure how they were made, to be honest. They're like a plastic material, but I'm not sure if they were printed or how they were produced. But yeah, so it's a matter of, it's not Bandai, so it's snap together. So you kind of have to know how to make it stay together, and so it doesn't fall apart. So the process as far as building a resin kit, especially a full resin kit, is if the parts don't fit, how do I fix that? How do I make sure when I put the arms on, they're gonna fall off? Like I could pick this guy up by his crotch and he is super, super solid with the exception of the shield because he's just kind of pegged in.
Are these panel lines part of the kit or are they panel lines that you've scribed in?
So they're part of the kit, but the very first step I do on a kit like this is I go back and I rescribe all the panel lines. Because I have to anticipate all the prep, primer, and paint that are gonna go onto it.
That will diminish the lines.
That will fill them in, and if I don't do that, I try to go do a panel wash and there's nothing there. So very first step is to go through and scribe all the panel lines nice and deep, just in prep for all the prep work that's going to go into the paint job.
So clean, these 45-degree angles are.
And that's interesting you say that because that's a very indicative to gunpla.
Yeah.
All these really kind of harsh angles and things, even on these really curved surfaces, it's all the different angles and the way the panels are kind of scribed and delineated, kind of gives it that aesthetic.
Yes.
So you got
and scale.
In scale, yeah. So you got kind of this organic shape with all these really cool angled panels on it. So it's kind of a really beautiful mix. Yeah,
Absolutely.
It looks great.
All right, so you're deepening the panel lines, you're engineering the assembly, making sure it's all rugged.
A lot of magnets in this guy.
Yeah, okay.
So the arms are magnetized, those come off. The back skirt is magnetized.
Can we take an arm off? Can we take a look?
So I can take, you okay? So this comes off, and I've got a wire right there, because the thrusters are lit.
Yeah.
And now we'll do some disassembly. So I take that off. So I have to give a website a shout out because lighting this was a challenge to me. I'm not one to light things. So when Joseph said he wanted this lit, I'm like, I got to figure that out. There's a company called Evans Design. and they specifically cater to scale modelers. So I called them, like, I've got this project, we have everything you need, kind of told them what I wanted to do, and it's plug and play.
Might I take a look?
Go right ahead.
So, as a resin kit, the sub-assemblies aren't part of it necessarily.
No. I have to make all the sub-assemblies.
You're making them and you're painting them to still look like they are layered.
Correct. So, like inside of all these details, I brought all these little panels out. That's all done with masking and panel lining. So, like, this shoulder alone probably has 30 or 40 pieces in it.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's all just done with layering. So if I put that down, now this arm, just hold it. There's a magnet. If I take this off, there's a magnet there.
Yeah.
And it's also kind of a pressure fit. And if I take this off, I could actually take this off a little bit. This arm does come out, but this is also magnetized. So I've also designed this to be able to get into the wiring if needed to be. It's a really tight fit, but there we go.
And you're painting sub-assemblies as you go?
So the way I handle this is it's various stages of prep and paint. So the very first thing I do, like, is scrub the panel lines. I do a light sanding on everything. On resin kits, you have what's called a gate, which is it'd be the same thing from a sprue when you cut it off. It's a little nib.
Yep.
Same thing. It's a gate, but it's where they poured the resin into the mold.
Yep.
Take care of those. If there's any mold lines or mold slips, like, in a 2-part mold, you got 2 parts of silicone. Sometimes they'll do this kind of thing, so you get step. Sometimes they'll sand out. Sometimes I got to putty and redo some sculpting. This kit is really good. I just had some slight mold lines, but there's 340 pieces. So at 345 times, I have to go through and get all the mold lines out, sand them out, scribe, all that fun stuff. So that's why it takes so long.
And with every kit, it's a different approach. You're not building 5 of these. You're kind of figuring out your workflow, laying all the parts out.
So, like, this is magnetized. And if I were to continue taking this apart, I could take the top of the torso off. You'd see where all the wires connect.
Yeah.
So after the scribing, initial cleanup of mold lines, gate removal and stuff like that, it's time to give it a really good bath. I'm neurotic about cleaning resin because of mold release. So when they're casting a resin kit, they've got to spray a mold release in the mold so the resin doesn't stick.
Yep.
And they can reuse those molds over and over again. It gets a bath in an ultrasonic cleaner. Then I lay down my first coat of primer, and now we start more sanding. If you don't like to sand, don't build models. I would say 60% of it is sanding.
Yeah.
So then the primer acts as a guide coat. So when I do that first round of primer, I'd say 90% of it gets sanded off. I'm looking for the panel or the print lines I mentioned, because you can't see them by the eye.
No.
But when you start sanding, they start to come out. Any little imperfections in the resin, those get sanded out. Again, mold lines, mold slips. So that's the first round of primer. Gets another bath. Ultrasonic, give it a bath. Second round of primer. Now I'm really, really getting in there with like an optivisor, magnifying glass, and looking for any little imperfections. And I'm marking with a Sharpie. And that Sharpie now acts as a sanding guide. So if I see a mold line, I just kind of go over it. And as I sand, once the Sharpie's gone, I know it's gone. So then I do one more kind of round of spot priming. Now it's finally ready for paint. So this took 6 weeks.
Just to prep before paint?
No, 3 weeks of it was prep.
Okay.
A little over 3 weeks was just prep before I put any color on it. And this is a really good kit. You get one that's not so good, it's gonna take longer. So now the paint. So the way I do red, I usually put down a black base coat first, and then all the highlighting you see is underneath the red. Then I highlight with white. And I can control the contrast of that shading with how far do I get close to that panel line? How much do I blend the white paint to kind of mute the black? And so there's a kind of a fine line. It's all personal preference on that step.
When I think of it, it's the other way around where your shading is on top, but that's supposed to be revealing, but you're actually revealing the undercoat.
Correct. So the way I do is on the Gundam, it's called pre-shading, where you're doing the highlighting and shadow underneath the color.
Oh.
If you're doing on top, it's called post-shading.
Got it.
So you got pre and post-shading. I know some painters that do post-shading, and it looks beautiful.
Yeah.
It's a little harder to do, in my opinion, because once that color is on, you have to be super, super accurate with that shading. Any little inconsistency is going to show up big time. And it tends to be a little more punchy too, a little more contrast. But I can control the contrast with how much I blend that white paint. So for instance, on this, like on the shoulder is a good example. And it doesn't show up in photos most of the time. It's very subtle, you know? So I'll go and I'll add white highlights in between all these panels.
Yeah.
And bring that really, really bright. And I back off my airbrush and I start misting white on it until I think, well, that looks pretty good. And then I don't put the red on until at least the next day because that paint's gonna dry down and that's gonna show me the contrast I have. So the next day, I'll look at it. If I feel like I need to blend it in a little more, I will. But after you've done it for a while, you kind of know when to stop that fits your taste. So this one, once I got that done, the next day was the red. And this is almost Mr. Color paints, by the way, which is my favorite paint. For the red, it's real simple. I do a mist coat and then one wet coat, and that's it.
Because you don't want to hide that shading work.
Right. Now I could add more red, and it's not gonna really hide it. It's gonna change the vibrance a little bit, maybe a little bit of the opacity, but you just you do it slowly. So you do one test piece, you let it dry down, seal it, so you know what it's gonna look like in the end. And then once you're happy there, then you can continue doing on everything else. So that's how I do red. Black, white highlight, blend a little bit, red color.
Is there a lot of masking as well?
Yeah, we love masking.
Yeah, sanding and masking.
If you don't like to sand or mask, don't build them up. Particularly in Gundam, since it's such, depending on what you're doing. Some of the other guys who like do weathered stuff, you're not trying to be so precise maybe.
Yeah.
But when you're doing something like this that's really clean, the masking is a big part of it. If I take the shield off here, you can see all this.
Oh, wow.
All that work.
Oh my gosh. Your order of operations must be incredibly precise.
Yeah, so a new razor blade, and there's also an order of painting when you're masking, depending if you're airbrushing or hand painting, at least for me. If I know I'm gonna do masking, I work my way from the bottom up. Because what I wanna do, especially on something like the shield, and if I took the leg armors off, it'd have all this detail underneath there. Same thing. So I work from the lowest spot, get that color down, put these little silver, then I mask it. And that doesn't get unmasked until that masking tape stays on until the very end. So
you don't even know if you've mismasked or anything?
There will be some touch-ups here and there, but I've gotten pretty good at it. I've gotten pretty good at it. So yeah, the masking. So I always start from the lowest spot, get that color down, let it dry overnight, mask it, next color, just work my way up. And then the fun part is taking the tape off. Where it's like, it's the reveal.
Yes.
It's like, okay, my work has paid off.
Yes.
And then the next step on that I do on these is I'll put down a high gloss coat. Sometimes I use an automotive 2K clear, or but on this one I use just the Mr. Color clear. Mr. Color has a line of paints called GX. It's like a higher pigmented, it's like their higher end paints.
It looks great.
And if you know how to spray, you can get glass-like finish. And it's just technique as far as getting that look. And once that's cured, now it's time for the markings. This kit came with dry transfers instead of water slides. So, and the way those work, it's on a plastic backing, and you cut them out individually, use some clear masking tape, get it in place, and you only get one shot. It's not like a decal where if you you can play with it, you get one shot. And then you rub it on with a blunt object and it releases from that backing. Yeah. The challenge I had with this kit, because it's an old kit, it's been sitting in a closet for 15 years, those dry transfers were dry. They've dried out. So as I was cutting some of the dry transfers off for the field, some of the letters were releasing off that field. So, it's on the back side, but I don't want to turn it around. But like, for instance, I was taking this one off, and there's a number 0 and the letter N. I went to go put it on, and it was still on the protective paper. So I had to surgically place some of those letters.
Wow.
Luckily, I was able to use like 98% of them with no problem. So yeah, but the great thing about dry transfers is they're super flat. Yeah. And they look painted on. Yeah. Even really good water slide decals, sometimes depending on the finish you use, you can kind of see a little border, yeah. But I always say flat coat's your friend because it does two things. It really shows off the shading, and it shows it hides a lot of little inconsistencies made, little mistakes that do I dare say, but flat is your friend. I like it because, especially on gunpla, because it really shows shading off. If you start adding gloss to it, it kind of kills it a little bit. So yeah, so then after that, it's the flat coat, final assembly. For the lighting on this one, like I said, I'm not one to light things. I actually hollowed out the legs from the hip all the way down to the foot, and there's a 3/8 inch brass tube. Not only acts as a pin is something you use to hold two pieces together, either for stability or just to kind of hold it together while you work. So that's pinned the legs together, and that's my conduit for all the wiring. So yeah, and then everything else is, there's some pins here and there, magnets. For shipping purposes, the fuel tanks come off, this comes off, the side skirts will come off, the head comes off, it plugs in. But yeah, that's kind of like my process, and it just, it's time consuming.
It's absolutely 6 weeks of work on this.
Yeah, a little over 6 weeks.
And to take a over decade old resin kit to make it look like a manufactured thing at scale.
Yeah, right? And there's a great variety of, I think especially newer guys are intimidated by resin. I actually find it easier to work with than plastic personally. I come from an automotive body background, so I'm used to Bondo and sanding and all. To me, it's like working with Bondo. It's just a different shape. But it's relatively easy. You just have to know how to fix things in castings that may not be so perfect. That's where people get intimidated. They see something and they don't know how to fix it. So it's sanding, putty work, stuff like that.
Sanding and masking. Gotta love it.
It's taking those basic skills that you learn and just kind of bringing them up a level. Yeah.
Well, fantastic work, Matt.
Thank you.
Incredible. And to see all the details as you're taking pieces off
Yeah.
on the other side, something that only the final collector is going to see.
Yeah.
That's great. That's
Yeah.
great. Fantastic. Thank you. Pleasure
Thank you
to meet
so much. Thanks for chatting.
Thank you for watching that video. I want to tell you about our demerit badges, because we know that being a maker is a lifelong enterprise of trying new things and learning new skills, and it is also about repeatedly messing everything up. And we like to celebrate that, because failure is not just an option, it is intrinsic to the creative process. And to that end, we have 3 new bundles of demerit badges right now on tested-store.com. We've got your Shop Tool Fails demerit badge bundle up here on top. Here in the middle, we have the Everyday Whoops demerit badge bundle. And at the bottom, we've got my favorite, the Shit Happens demerit badge bundle. You can get any one of these bundles, and we are considering offering a bundle of all 24, not those, of all 24 demerit badges we have released, but we're not sure what to call it. You have a suggestion? Put it in the comments.